Puts me so much trouble, it's not my fault. All this I also lose my friends, I lost my baby. That is looking crack only today. Want to change, he wanted us. So the cougar try more like to feel. I'd kill the grill, take your life in a second. The table drinks coffee in my kitchen, I mentioned eating every song, I just wanted to go away. You decide to stay in the well. I want to be forgiven, I don't like this kid for money. Sorry I was scared, you're not the way it feels. Like to sleep waiting for someone to come in and kill you. The final thing is that now I'm not afraid of anything. Cause they're gonna kill anyone that feels so powerful. They try by you every your skin of everything is confusing. You will be good but you will be more. You will be good but you will be more. You will be good but you will be more. Alone every day it is a praise of pleasure.
Good morning and welcome to Dynasty 365, where the film will set you free. Today we're going to be talking about Greg Dortch, an undrafted free agent wide receiver for the New York Jets, and his situation that surrounds him there. We're also going to talk about getting your guys and the importance of that long term. In the Jets wide receiver room, they've got Robbie Anderson, who is a speed demon, but he's been in trouble multiple times with the law. He's averaging 6.9 targets per game over the last 2 years. He has 15 yards per route run, 8 yards per target, and 14 yards per touch. And that 8 yards per target is because of his 53% catch percentage. If he played all 16 games, he would have averaged 900 yards per year and 7 touchdowns per year. He's talented, but he's mainly a deep threat with character concerns. And in my experience, those don't seem to go away too easily. They've also got Quincy Enunwa, who is a possession and all-around wide receiver with recent health and injury issues. He's averaging 6.4 targets per game over the last 2 years, and in many of those games he's been injured or he probably would have received more. He averages 13 yards per route, 7.5 yards per target, and 13 yards per touch. Again, his yards per target is lower due to his 56% catch percentage. If he played all 16 games, he'd average 800 yards per season and 3 touchdowns a year. If he could stay healthy, I really feel like he would beat those averages. He is a highly versatile receiver and can play all positions, and he's a good blocker who can move the chains with possession-style catches, but has also shown the ability to make guys miss with agility. The Jets also added Jamison Crowder, the slot receiver formerly of the Redskins. He's a slot technician, but he's small, and he dealt with many injuries last year. Over the last 3 seasons, he's averaged 6.3 targets per game, 13 yards per route, 8 yards per target, and 12 yards per touch, with a 64% catch percentage. If he could play 16 games, he'd average 800 yards per season and 5 touchdowns a year. If he does stay healthy, that's probably about his range of outcomes, plus or minus about 100 yards and a couple touchdowns. All of the other wide receivers are complete Jags. At tight end, they've got Chris Herndon, who was a rookie last year. He's a future above average to stud fantasy tight end. He can block extremely well, is fast, has great hands, but he's still learning route running. Herndon's going to be suspended for the first 2 to 4 games this year due to a DUI last year right after he was drafted. I can't find a source on how many games that is yet. For the averages, I only used the 12 games that he started last year, and using that, he's averaging 4.7 targets per game, which will surely go up. 13 yards per route, 9 yards per target, and 13 yards per touch, with a 70% catch percentage. Taking that out to 16 games, he'd average 700 yards per season and 5 touchdowns per season, and I expect both of those numbers to be higher this year, but it depends on how many games he does miss from that suspension. Herndon is extremely talented, but he's not all the way to being a complete tight end yet. He fell in the draft due to an MCL tear and from sitting behind Njoku for most of his career. If I had Njoku right now, I'd trade Njoku for Herndon and pick up an extra pick or 2 to make up the difference in how leagues are valuing Njoku right now. But again, I'm not too current on the startup drafts, so I still would think about trading Njoku for Herndon straight up. I think Herndon has a very strong chance of being the number 1 target outside of Le'Veon Bell in the passing game for the Jets this year. And speaking of Bell, he was acquired by the Jets this offseason. Over his last 2 years, he's averaging 100 targets per season, 600 yards receiving with an 80% catch rate, and 7.4 targets per game, which would come out to 119 targets over 16 games. He averages 8 yards per route and slightly over 6 yards per target, but he hasn't played 16 games since 2014, so I'm not sure how much a year off is going to help or hurt him. But the good news is he's only going to be 26 this upcoming season. They've also got Elijah McGuire, who got 28 targets per year over his last 2 years, with 10 yards per route and slightly over 6 yards per target, and a 63% catch percentage. Ty Montgomery averaged 42 targets per year when he was playing in Green Bay at 8 yards per route and 6 yards per target with a 75% catch percentage. I'm pretty sure Le'Veon's going to be on the field most of the time. At quarterback, they've got second-year player Sam Darnold, who would have thrown for 3,500 yards and 21 touchdowns if he wouldn't have missed 3 games due to injury. I do expect his totals this year to be higher than that pace. He had a 78 passer rating last year, and based on his college film, he's accurate. He likes short and middle-of-the-field passes to move the offense, but he will go deep when it calls for it. Darnold will also run to keep the offense on schedule, but he had too many turnovers last year, averaging 1.7 a game. The Jets' passing offense was 8th to last in pass yards per game, 6th to last in pass touchdowns per game, and 4th to last in total offensive yards per game. And they were also 10th to last in points per game and 11th to last in passing attempts per game. The offensive line was 18th in pass protection. In the run game, they were last in yards created for the running back, 7th to last in power success percentage, and they were consistently bottom 4 in the league in all the other run metrics. They did add Kaleki Osemele, the guard from Oakland, and a third-round tackle in the draft, and Osemele should improve both the run and pass for this unit, so I expect all of their overall performance to go up, but one guard doesn't change the other 4 positions, so temper your expectations off of adding one player, especially for Le'Veon Bell. The Jets' offense was 2nd to last in yards per drive, 4th to last in points per drive, 3rd to last in time of possession per drive, and they were middle of the pack in their run-to-pass ratio, with 44% of their plays being run calls. On defense, they were 8th to last in yards per game, 4th to last in points per game, 7th to last in rushing yards per game, and 9th to last in passing yards allowed per game with a 4-12 record. They added Quinnen Williams at nose tackle and C.J. Mosley at inside linebacker, which are huge instant upgrades. They also got troubled but talented Ja'Kai Polite in the draft, who could impact immediately off the edge as well. Their defense is almost certainly improved. It should allow for more scoring opportunities and a more run-heavy approach, especially with the addition of Le'Veon Bell. But they could also opt to extend their run game with the short pass because of how good Sam Darnold is in that area. The Jets have a new head coach this year with Adam Gase, previously of the Dolphins. He's a total wild card, but I don't have very high hopes for him. He's a complete liar to the media. He holds grudges against players, and honestly was very surprised that that's who they decided to hire to be the coach for their 3rd overall pick quarterback from last year. Gase does have a pretty good offensive history, but he had a dumpster fire to work with in Miami, and Tannehill couldn't stay healthy. So at this point, it's still hard to tell if Gase is a good head coach or if he was just a product of Peyton Manning in Denver. So now let's talk about what Greg the Torch Dortch brings to the table as a wide receiver. He was my pre-draft wide receiver 12 at only 5'7", 173 pounds, 8.875-inch hands, and a 71-inch wingspan. The concerning thing is that he was the 2nd lowest receiver in weight divided by height, besides Marquise Brown, but he was still considerably thicker than Brown. Dortch is surprisingly 14th in the class in the wingspan divided by height metric, and 10th in the class in hand size divided by height, but ran a 4.4940 at his pro day. You know how I talk about uncertainty a lot? Well, we don't have any other numbers, no jumps, no agility times, no bench for Dortch, but he reportedly ran great agility times, which does not surprise me based on film, but still having the lack of concrete information does lower where I would take him in a draft. These are the positive qualities that Dortch shows on film. He's a natural hands catcher, tough, usually gives blocking effort. He's physical both during the release and downfield throughout his route. He finds the soft spot in the zone. He's got great ball tracking and effort to get to the ball on deep shots. Dortch has great vision and plants as a ball carrier. He's a yak machine, can make one-handed catches, possesses both acceleration and adequate speed. He shows great routes at times, is quick, has great balance and body control. He creates for himself with agility, acceleration, and his football IQ. I'd compare him to a mini Steve Smith clone, or if Allen Iverson played football. He's the youngest receiver in the class and the best low ball catcher I have ever seen. Dortch's weaknesses are that he's small, clearly. He's got non-elite long speed. He has shown inconsistent effort blocking and on his routes, and he did show either some conditioning or some mentality issues when his team was losing late in games. I don't know if he's going to be able to separate with athleticism in the NFL, and he will miss some contested catches. But overall, the positives greatly outweigh the negatives, and Greg Dortch is, about as much as you can be, a complete receiver entering the NFL. Where does this information leave us on deciding where to draft Greg Dortch or to draft him at all? Well, he's got a young quarterback that was picked high in the draft. My prediction is that he'll be the wide receiver 4 on the depth chart day 1, and he's behind injury and trouble-prone receiver. He'll be the Jets' day 1 punt and kick returner. I am worried about injuries with his size, his weight, and his weight divided by height. I would almost guarantee you that Dortch is going to be picked up on waiver wires this season. I just don't know how all 3 of those players are not going to get injured, and they're going to be without Herndon for a couple games to start the year. And Darnold's short and intermediate accuracy and overall play style is a perfect fit for Dortch. The biggest issue is that they're a low-volume passing offense and scoring offense. But last year, the Jets did show that they're not afraid to let Sam Darnold throw, even if he's turning the ball over. I really want to be able to say to pick up Greg Dortch at the end of your rookie drafts, just like I did with Emmanuel Butler. And by the way, with Butler, I'm aware that they have Dez Bryant and Brandon Marshall, but I don't see either of them as having much, if anything, left in the tank. But anyways, back to Dortch. His athletic ability is probably going to be displayed during training camp in the preseason. I'll be pretty much shocked if he doesn't, because he's just such a good little football player. I hate that I have to say little, but if I didn't have to say little, he'd be going in the 2nd and 3rd round of your rookie drafts right now. I love how young he is. I love how competitive and tough he is. And I love that the receivers in front of him on the depth chart aren't exactly world beaters, and they all have their own either injury or suspension issue that I'll be pretty surprised if 16 games doesn't knock at least one of them out for the rest of the year, or a significant portion of time. If Butler was on the Jets and Dortch was on the Saints, I would take Dortch before Butler. If they were both on the same team, I would take Dortch before Butler. And Butler has 9 inches and 40 pounds on him. That's how much I like Dortch. Him being on the Jets and that low volume passing offense where they now have an elite pass catching running back and added another receiver in the offseason, that's pretty darn good. Makes me hesitant to recommend to draft Dortch in your rookie drafts. However, I love the player. I do think he can help your fantasy team if you're weak at wide receiver, but the question is for how long because of his size concerns. But he was always going to be landing spot dependent because of how little he is. He needs an accurate passer, so it's a really good thing that he did find that with Sam Darnold, but Sam Darnold is not Drew Brees today at all, so that's why you have to go Butler. That's why you have to go with a big target, but Greg Dortch is going to surprise a lot of people this year. First, in the return game, and then if injury happens, he's going to get some play as a receiver for the Jets. So if I had a weak team, say a really bad orphan, or things haven't been going too well, and I've got some guys that I can cut and not feel anything, I definitely snag Dortch after your rookie draft or in the final round of your rookie draft if it's super deep, because I think at worst, he's going to be startable this season for at least some games because of the depth chart problems that they do have. He's also so young that I do think he has more upside than he's being given credit for, partially because people don't really know who he is, but partially because people write him off because of his height and weight. A lot of people did that with Philip Lindsay last year, and Philip Lindsay probably helped a lot of teams, both in Dynasty and Fantasy, win championship. I don't think Dortch has that potential because of how bad the team is overall. Even though they did probably get a lot better, they still have some issues, but that's also kind of a good thing if, say, Jamison Crowder goes down. I think Dortch can step right in and produce not the the same, but relatively close numbers. In his first season, he's just an all-around great football player, so fun to watch, so fun to root for, so fun to hope he succeeds, and the biggest stock killer would have been going to an inaccurate quarterback, and instead he got a young quarterback that was drafted highly, that already has the accuracy to hit a small target over the middle, in the slot, and on timing routes. I don't think Dortch is ever going to be the best player in the NFL, but I do think he has solid potential to be a fantasy starter for at least a couple years, given his current situation. I wish I could recommend drafting him, but the offense just isn't good enough yet for that to really be a wise decision, but I'm heavily considering picking him up as an undrafted free agent before the first preseason game because he has some very special qualities in a well-rounded game at a very young age. Now for today's advice. In the rookie draft, get your guys. You're not going to learn anything if you don't make the decision on who to draft. It depends on if you want to learn or if you want to play. I like to win things that I play. Some people just like to play. I get it. You should probably find a trustworthy expert and just blindly follow their rankings if that's the way you want to play. But I like to learn from my mistakes and make better decisions in the future. So if you are following the rankings, examine the situation that player is going to land in carefully before you just blindly pick their next player. Some things are obvious, like A.J. Brown going to a team that was second to last in passing attempts per game and had the second highest run call percentage in the NFL. That's not a great recipe for first-year fantasy impact. So you can follow their rankings if you really want to, but you can still look at the situation to determine, even within a couple spots up or down, which situations are better primed for instant impact. All Dynasty experts will be wrong, including myself, even though I hate the term expert in pretty much fucking anything. The only difference that makes someone an expert and someone else not an expert is calling yourself an expert. I'll wait to call myself an expert until the results show I'm an expert. But anyway, situations do change. You can't control that, but all you can do is make the decisions based on the current information that you have right now. The Mecole 101 pick is a pretty risky take, I get it. But right now, Tyreek Hill is not going to be playing on the Chiefs, in my estimation. That could change, but I'm so sure that he won't be on the Chiefs specifically. That's why I have the confidence to take Mecole where I would want to take him. Even if Tyreek still does come back, I'm still not sure I would move Mecole down off the 101. They still have a lot of targets left to go around, and no one very threatening to take them, in my estimation. So I went against some of my own advice by telling you to trade down and trade out of this draft, but I did it by trading a future first-round pick for Drew Lock and another future pick in return. The reason I did this is I was following my other advice about getting my guy at a lower price than I expect him to have in 1 year. Also, I trust my ability to find a first-round player later in the draft than the first-round pick. I like to use first-round picks in a lot of situations when my team is already good to get what I want to have happen. I don't care about losing the value in that trade because I won the draft. I won the overall game that's greater than that one specific trade. But in general, yes, trade down and trade out. I definitely let emotions influence that decision. I couldn't allow the next franchise quarterback of the Broncos that I had my highest rated quarterback going into the draft go when he was still available and it really wouldn't cost me that much value-wise as it sat to get him. But even if I don't want to draft a player at that specific pick next year, I can package multiple picks up and find a team that has a lot of holes next year during the draft because they're going to be more likely to want to move down, and I'll approach them probably before the draft instead of during. Another thing a lot of new players don't know is how to evaluate pick value. So if you are trying to move up, start at a position way higher than your current position. Like say you've got a late second and they've got a mid first, and offer them your second and your second next year for that pick. They're probably going to laugh or tell you that's way off, and that's fine. After that guy picks, go to the next guy on the clock, ask him for the same trade. Eventually, someone's going to say yes. And then now you'll know kind of where to value those picks in relation to each other. That's all I've got for today, guys. I wanted to give a special thanks today to Ross, who is my first official patron. Tomorrow we'll be talking about Kahale Warring, tight end for Houston. As always, you can support this daily Dynasty podcast continuing on Patreon. And tomorrow, again today when this releases, I'll be continuing to work on that section and bring it up to a standard that I'm comfortable with to best help you guys win. The happy song of the day today is Jamming by Bob Marley, and that link will be in the episode description, as will the football song of the day, Till I Die by MGK, or Machine Gun Kelly, who Eminem absolutely destroyed. But that's what happens when you call out the best lyricist of all time. Again, I just wanted to thank everyone for listening and taking the time out of their day to hopefully learn something about Dynasty, or even hear a different perspective about Dynasty philosophy, or just completely disagree with me, and I provided you some entertainment value for 20 minutes. Anyways, I'll be back tomorrow. You've been listening to Dynasty 365, where the film will set you free.
So much trouble, it's not my fault. All this I also lose my friends, I lost my baby that was smoking crack. Only today want to change. He wanted us on the cougar and try more like to feel. I'd kill the real, take your life in a second. The devil drinks coffee in my kitchen, I mentioned in every song, I just wanted to go away. You decide to stay in the well. I want to be forgiven, I don't like this kid for money. Sorry, I was scared, you're not the way it feels. Like to sleep waiting for someone to come in and kill you. The final thing is stop now, I'm not afraid of anything. Go they're gonna kill anyone that feels so powerful. They trip by you and your skin up, everything is confusing. You will be good, but you will be more. You will be good, but you will be more. You will be good, but you will be more. Alone every day, it is a praise of pleasure.